All right, talk about a trigger warning. This episode might make you a little uncomfortable. I was able to get a behind the scenes look with Dr. Daniel Amen. He's a board certified psychiatrist. He has scanned hundreds of thousands of brains, and I went to one of his 11 clinics to get my scanned. Like I said, a trigger warning. So if you've ever suffered from maybe staying on task or a poor relationship with food, you may have a brain that looks a lot like mine.
All right, goal. Look at your brain and make it better. What do you think about that?
Amen.
Amen.
No pun intended.
So, context, you have a past history of depression, had postpartum depression, been diagnosed with anxiety, you had a binge eating disorder in the past, and that perfectly fits your brain, which we'll talk about. You've had neurofeedback, which was helpful, and lifestyle choices, which were helpful, and fewer toxic substances for your brain, and that was helpful. You were on Zoloft in the past, but it increased depression and anxiety, which fits your scan. You were on Wellbutrin, which, at least according to your scan, would have been a better medicine for you. I always think of my patients in these four big circles. The Amen Whole 4, the program we're doing in the White House, is these four circles. That's why it's called the Whole 4. Get your brain healthy, discipline your mind, reconnect off devices, all with a sense of meaning and purpose. And this big idea I came up with, if you want to keep your brain healthy or prevent or treat pending problems, we have to go after these 11 risk factors. And we know what they are. And so, for example, B is for blood flow. And I'm going to tell you your frontal lobes are low in blood flow. Retirement and aging. Your brain looks a little bit older than you do. Inflammation, which you don't have. I looked at your blood tests. Genetics. There's stuff. You're not depressed. You've had some childhood stress. That's the ACE score. It's on a scale of 0 to 10. How many bad things happened to you when you were a child? 3 is a lot. Immunity to infections, your vitamin D levels, awesome. Hormones look fine. Not overweight. Your blood sugar is excellent. But sleep could be better. I have all this right so far?
So far, so good.
Okay. You took the X test, which is sort of a test to see if you have ADD. Whenever you have a loved one who has it, it's just a question. And the CPT actually wasn't sure. You had some things that were not great, like sustained attention, but other things were fine. So here's the scan. And we do a study called SPECT. It's called Brain SPECT Imaging. SPECT looks at blood flow and activity. It looks at how your brain works. And it basically shows us 3 things: good activity, too little, or too much. And then my job becomes balancing it. And here's an example of a healthy scan. And we render it in these 2 ways. The one on the left is the surface scan, looks at the outside surface of the brain, and it should just be full, even, and symmetrical. So here we're looking underneath the brain. This is going to be the most important one for you. From the right side, left side, down from the top. Color doesn't matter in these. It's the shape, full, even, symmetrical. The images on the right, the colors do matter. Blue is average activity. Red is the top 15%. White is the top 8%, which should be back here in the cerebellum, which is the coordination part of the brain, but it happens to have about half the brain's neurons. If we look at your scan, you have a beautiful scan, but you see the holes here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You have lower activity in your prefrontal cortex. And if I saw this and I didn't see anything else, I would be highly suspicious you have ADD. And if you add that to having someone in your family who has it, and then on the checklist you filled out, there were plenty of ADD symptoms. So I want to talk about that to just see if you think that might fit. It certainly fits your scan. That's the most important thing here. If you do what I say, 4 or 5 months from now, your brain can look like the one on the right. So I have a program that it's like, if you do what I say, this is what it's going to look like. And if you don't do what I say in 5 years, this is what it's going to look like. So which one do you want? And so you have no holes in your brain. There's nothing broken. It's sleepy, especially here in the front. And I think, because one of your concerns is your memory, and I think it's not so much your memory that you don't get things in and keep them because you're distracted. Mm-hmm. And then here's your active scan. You have a beautiful cerebellum. No one's ever told you that before. The medicine that works with this is Wellbutrin, or the supplement would be SAMe and betaine. And so, I can tell if somebody's depressed in 10 minutes, right? It's not hard. What I can't tell is what's the underlying biology of your brain. And so if I know that was in your history, plus I have your scan, that leads to better interventions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, fascinating.
So talk to me about what you think about what I just told you.
I think it's fascinating in the sense that especially as you become a parent and you get a little bit older, you don't necessarily regret life choices, but you reflect on them simply because you want to make sure that you're doing the best job as a parent and as a spouse to have a successful marriage and relationship. If you're in it for longevity, which we all are. So it fills the gaps that this wasn't available and accessible in the midst of whatever actions I was taking in my 20s. So this is something that could save lives. It's not something that we had at our fingertips.
So what was school like for you when you were growing up?
Hours of studying. I mean, it was just incessant. School was really hard for me. I did fairly well in school, but it wasn't for lack of trying. I did well in school. I was able to get by, but everything seemed easier for everyone else.
So it was harder.
It was hard. School was hard.
And girls don't get diagnosed with ADD often because they're not a pain in the neck. Right. So boys bring negative attention to themselves, and there's still serious gender bias in that if a little boy is having trouble, people go, he's going to have to take care of a family someday. If a little girl is having trouble, especially if she's cute, they're going, oh, well, she'll marry somebody nice. And that's not okay, because women are actually doing way more than men, because, now most women work outside the house. They're still primary caretakers for the children, primary caretakers for the house. And it's chronic stress. And if you have undiagnosed ADD, your life just always feels stressful and chaotic. And getting it treated can be really helpful. And it doesn't mean medicine. I'd be curious about, the person that did your neurofeedback, if they thought you had ADD, because they should have seen sort of that signature on the neurofeedback equipment. But neurofeedback can help, exercise can help. There's certain supplements like L-tyrosine, green tea extract, rhodiola, saffron that can help Actually, saffron's really interesting for you because there's 5 studies showing it helps with the same efficacy as Ritalin. And there are 28 studies showing it has a mood enhancement benefit, like head to head against Wellbutrin, Zoloft, Prozac, uh, equally effective. But the antidepressants, not Wellbutrin, but the other ones, sort of decrease your libido, make it harder to have an orgasm. Saffron improves sexual interest and functioning. So I'm like a huge fan.
I think my husband probably is going to walk in the room and say, I'm a fan of that too. Uh, what's mind boggling to me is that I was able to develop coping mechanisms, and I think it came with my personality. So, we didn't have, certainly there were AP classes, and if I didn't do really well, I would go in for the extra work. So I was able to sort of finagle my way and survive at, a top tier university and check all the boxes. But I'm curious to if perhaps I had been medicated and I didn't have the ability to find that coping mechanism. And I think you and I have talked a little bit about the fact that if someone maybe had prescribed me Ritalin because they could tell that I couldn't focus, would that have also held me back? And how many women or men out there are given a band-aid and not necessarily aware of the other modalities of treatment? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that too often we go to medicine and people end up relying on pills instead of developing skills. But there's also the other side of that, which is if a child needed glasses, you would think it would be neglect not to give it to them. And I think of ADD. My first person I did a scan on, she was 44. She tried to kill herself the night before. And I'm like, I think you have ADD. She goes, oh no, adults can't have it. At which point my brain went, wait, I'm the doctor. And I said, well, we have this cool new study. She's my first spec scan. So you never love anybody as much as your first,
Right.
but it's my first scan. And so I did it twice, once at rest, once when she concentrated. And when she concentrated, her scan looked exactly like yours. And she started to cry when I explained it to her. And she said, you mean it's not my fault? And I wear glasses to drive, and I took my glasses out of my jacket and I put them on. I said, having ADD is sort of like people who need glasses.
Mm-hmm.
People who need glasses aren't dumb, crazy, or stupid. Our eyeballs are shaped funny. And we wear glasses to focus. Having ADD, clearly you're not dumb, crazy, or stupid. It's your frontal lobes just don't turn on when they should. And so you have trouble focusing. You've developed all sorts of coping mechanisms, and that's been helpful. My wife, who has ADD, neurosurgical ICU nurse, accomplished. When she got it treated, she's ended up writing 10 books. So it's like, I think she's a bit closer to her potential. And like glasses, she doesn't take the medicine all the time, but she takes it when she needs to focus.
Yeah, just the ability to, I mean, it sounds so cheesy, but to live your best life, to live up to your potential. We have this discussion so often, and I've talked to you about my daughter who's been diagnosed, is that you want to make the right decision because the more I learn is that it's this plaid that we don't know exactly how her brain works. I didn't know until 41 years of age exactly where my vulnerabilities are. And so one of the things you told me is we over medicate and then we under medicate. And that's because we don't get in and look at the real nuances of the lobes and where those weaknesses are.
And so we're left with this mess in our society of 25% of the adult population on psychiatric drugs. And we're not teaching people to love and care for their brains. And if you need medicine, well, great. If you need medicine for your pancreas, you take it, or your kidneys, or your heart. But because it's your brain, we think it's you as opposed to, just that part of you.
When you talk to clients, just like you're talking to me, certainly they may have this emotional breakdown. I thought this was my fault. I thought there was something wrong with me. Do you also empower them that it's not broken, it can be fixed? I think that is one of the biggest takeaways, is that it's not a death sentence, that it's not even too late for a 41-year-old. You just told me about your wife's immense success in a different chapter than her 20s.
So one of my favorite patients, 94, and I'm like, what are you doing in my office? And she said, well, you help my great granddaughter, you help my grandson, and you help my daughter. I want to read the paper. I never can finish the paper. And she had a scan very similar to yours. And she came back a month later and she was smiling and she said, I read my first book.
Wow.
I just love that so much. And I don't take broken people and put them back together. I take awesome people and just help them be a bit more awesome. And it's hope. And hope, we're just getting ready to publish this monster study on hope, 6,408 people. So it's the largest hope study ever done with imaging. And hope is the belief tomorrow can be better. And you have a role in it. And there are multiple ways to get there. So that's what hope is. And with lower frontal lobe function, lower hope, more negativity, more depression. And so if we fix that, and because I showed you, if you do what we say, this is what your brain can look like in a couple of months. Well, that's hope. And now we just have to go, so what are the routes there? Is it saffron? Is it Ritalin? Is it Wellbutrin? What would be, for sure, fewer, if any, toxins.
Mm-hmm.
You never want to do anything now to lower frontal lobe function. So you don't want to be hitting soccer balls with your head. Alcohol, you should just break up with. And marijuana, the same thing, because they decrease blood flow to your brain. And always live with this question: is what I'm doing good for my brain or bad for it? That's the mother question that we're going to base the brain health revolution on. Is this good for my brain or bad for it? And does it honor my creator? Because the program's coming from the White House Faith Office, which I'm so excited about. And my goal in showing your brain is I'm hoping you fall in love with it. And you go, oh no, I'm never hurting it again because I love it.
Your message is addicting, and I think the ability to take your platform. I'm really, and we'll feature this in the new year. And I said in one of our email exchanges, it's the year of the brain revolution, simply because maybe I'm coming out from under a rock, but like I said, this just wasn't something that we talked about. We talked about keeping our joints healthy. We talked about staying limber and stretching, and my husband was a college athlete. We had to make sure we were feeding our bodies. We're all about the dies, but we just don't talk about our most important body part, most important muscle is our brain. So what made you say, I'm going to go to the White House on this? And maybe they came to you. I don't need to know the nuances of how the relationship came about, but you already have a platform, and now this is going to be even more. You're already global, but it'll certainly continue to grow now at an alarming rate.
It's public knowledge. Pastor Paula White is President Trump's pastor. She got Ramsay Hunt, which is shingles that goes through your brainstem. And she was a mess. And she came to see me. She did my podcast and got so much better. She's like, everybody should be scanned. Everybody should love and care for their brain. And now she's the executive director of the White House Faith Office. And she's like, this has to go. everywhere. And she's the first person in my life that asked me, how big can you think? Like, no one has ever asked me that question. And I think it's just such a great question. And I'm like, well, what if the president declared the next 10 years the decade of brain health? And we got HHS and Secretary Kennedy's on board, and CMS, Dr. Oz is on board, and the FDA and NIH, all to embrace, stop calling these things mental illnesses. Let's go after brain health. Nobody wants to be called mental. Everybody wants a better brain. And yeah, I'm so excited with the opportunity to, talk about my work at this high level.
One of the questions I want to ask you before you go, and we talked about this, was I have been very blessed financially. I had access to you, regardless of the opportunities that you provided. And I just want to see it covered by insurance. That's all.
Right. That's why we have to harass Dr. Oz and the FDA. SPECT is FDA approved for blood flow and for stroke, but no imaging technology is approved for psychiatric illnesses. There's this huge bias against mental health, and it's just not fair. The Canadian Association of Nuclear Medicine endorses SPECT for psychiatric illness. It's covered in Canada. The European Society did it, but the American societies haven't. And, I think in part it's because big pharma supports them with a lot of money. And this is a new way. Well, there will be less medication prescribed, right? If I get people to stop drinking, get to a healthy weight, sleep better, love and care for their brain, the incidence of people on psychiatric drugs will go down by half. Even though you and I talked about, well, medicine's one of your options. So I'm not opposed to it. I'm opposed to them being in charge of the medical system. And when I trained as a psychiatrist in 1982, managed care hadn't taken over medicine. And I was like the whole person psychiatrist, right? I do your therapy, we do group, we talk to couples. I mean, I was like everything. And then in the late 1980s, early 1990s, managed care took over and they say, no, you're too expensive. You're just going to be the prescriber. At which point I went, absolutely not. That is not what I want to do. And stopped taking insurance and just sort of went my own way.
Before I let you go, I have to ask you a real spicy question. I love a good headline. Does Big Pharma want us all sick? It's easier to, like you said, that's a big percentage of folks on medicine. And that's just when it comes to brain health.
They want to be in the reorder business. They don't want to fix it. Like psychiatric medications don't cure anything. That should make you suspicious. I want you to get and stay well. I'm not a fan.
I appreciate you, Dr. Amen. I really do. I'm thankful for the access. I thank you for the time. And like I said, if we get one person to come see you, it's a victory to me for sure.
Thank you so much. I'm just so grateful for you understanding the message and helping me spread it.
And don't forget about us in the spring when you're taking all those media requests. You have to come back on the show. You got to promise.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.